Welcome back. This lecture is on the medium of exchange. Medium of exchange, money. Quick review of what we've seen in the previous lecture, right? So in the previous lecture, we said that human beings enter the marketplace because to reap the benefits of specialization and trade. The first exchange was in the form of barter. I give you apples and I get oranges in return. But the barter system is inefficient. Why is it inefficient? Please, Chloe?
You have to have a double coincidence of wants.
You have to have the double coincidence of wants. That means if I have apples and I want bananas, I have to find someone in the marketplace who wants my apples. That's number one. And double number two, that person has bananas. So that person must want the apples and that person must have the bananas for trade, for exchange to take place. So it's difficult. Imagine in a village, I have to go knock door to door. Somebody says, I want your apples, but I don't have bananas. Another person says, I have bananas, but I don't like apples. I don't want your apples, right? So trade is ineffective, is inefficient. There is shallow division of labor. There's limited exchange in the marketplace because of the double coincidence of wants. So what did human beings do in the marketplace via human action? Human beings, to facilitate exchange, to expedite exchange, there emerged in the marketplace what we call a medium of exchange. Money emerged. Money emerged out of a necessity to expedite trade. Money emerged praxeologically. What does it mean praxeologically? Praxeologically, that means it emerged via human action. Not by decree, not by design. There wasn't a king or a bureaucrat that said, let there be money and this is the money, this is the medium of exchange. No, it emerged organically in the marketplace out of praxeological necessity. Money emerged incrementally. It took many forms over time, right? So it emerged incrementally and not through legislation. So let's imagine the actual emergence of money. How did actually money emerge? Okay, so let's imagine a village in Bangladesh where Menger wants to trade with Mises. So Menger and Mises will trade with one another in Bangladesh. Okay, so imagine Menger wants to trade his apples for bananas. He finally knocks on one of the doors and he finds Mises. So Menger tells Mises, I have apples and I want bananas. But it turns out that Mises only has dates. So imagine I'm Menger, I'm knocking on your door, I'm saying I have apples, and you say, oh, I want your apples. And I said, okay, I'm looking for bananas. And you say, you know what, I don't have bananas, I have dates. Now, if Mises is able to convince Menger that dates are a marketable commodity, a commodity that everyone desires in the marketplace. And he convinces Menger that, you know what, take my dates and go to the next village, to the next neighbor, and he or she has the bananas, so you can use the date to get the bananas. If Mises is able to convince Menger, and then that transaction takes place, and if this transaction is repeated few more times, then naturally there emerges in the marketplace a medium of exchange. So dates now become valuable not because of its nutritional value, but in addition because now it's playing the role of a medium of exchange. So the value of dates, the demand for dates increases. What are dates doing? They're just facilitating exchange. Okay, so it's value because it's providing a service, an exchange service, and it had an innate value, it has a nutritional value. Therefore emerges a medium of exchange. Okay, so dates will have general acceptability and become the medium of exchange. Now, so this transformation of dates from having a nutritional value into playing the role of the medium of exchange, that's the inception of money. That's the idea how money came to exist. Carl Menger described money as arising not by decree but via human action. And individuals obviously gravitated towards the goods that are the most marketable, goods that have desired characteristics, What are some of the desired characteristics in our medium of exchange? Would tomatoes play a good medium of exchange? No, because, you know, because they don't have longevity. It's like quickly I take the tomatoes and then literally the next day I have to exchange it for the bananas that I would like to desire. Sometimes difficult to transport, right? They're not durable. They're not divisible. How about maybe I want to use half a tomato? Then what happens? The other half quickly is going to deteriorate, right? So people gravitated towards goods that have certain desired characteristic. They want that medium of exchange to be durable, recognizable, transportable, divisible, right, for a smaller transaction, right? So that's where the gravitation took place. Mises, the regression theorem states that the medium of exchange must have an intrinsic value. So if today a medium of exchange has value, that value should be dependent, right? If I accept a medium of exchange from you, it must have a value that existed prior of my acceptance. That means yesterday that commodity had a value. And if you go back in time with the inception of money, that means that particular commodity that was picked as a medium of exchange must have an intrinsic value. Okay, so money cannot come out of thin air. It must have an intrinsic value. That's the Austrian, the Misesian view of the evolution of money, that the medium of exchange must have an existing value. This is important because there is a lot of confusion, right, within the Austrian circles, then in general, you know, exchange circles. Can Bitcoin play, from an Austrian perspective, the role of a medium of exchange? Can Bitcoin play, from an Austrian perspective, from a Misesian perspective, the role of a medium of exchange? No, I have no. Matthew is saying no. Patel is saying yes. No. Could Bitcoin, according to Austrian standards, play the role of the medium of exchange? Think so. Anyone else?
Maybe it's pre-existing value.
Anyone else?
Scarcity.
Maybe it's a pre-existing value, but what was Bitcoin's pre-existing value?
It's scarcity.
Nothing.
Scarcity, but that scarcity must have an initial value before it's picked as a medium of exchange. Where is the value of Bitcoin is coming from?
It's doing trade outside the government money.
Is doing it, so it has, but so it has a value because you're trading outside of government, means outside a government monopoly or fiat money. But what does Bitcoin do? What is the inception? How do you get Bitcoins? How new Bitcoins come into existence in the marketplace? So now, today, new Bitcoins enter the marketplace. How are they entering the marketplace? They're providing what? The only way a new Bitcoin enters circulation, the stock increases, every day it's increasing, is by mining. And what is mining? What do miners do? They verify, they play the role of an accounting service. So Bitcoin is not a commodity money, but it's a service money. Because Bitcoin provides a service, an accounting service. Not only they verify the transaction, but they keep record. It's like they're accountants. You know, if you want to transfer money from one account to another account, your banker, your accountant, right? The accountants at the bank, so Bitcoin is playing the role of a banking service, or better yet, an accounting service. So accounting services have always had value in the marketplace. It has a value in the marketplace, okay? So you can argue that Bitcoin is a service money and it doesn't violate the Misesian regression theorem of money, okay? Now, so over time, societies gravitated towards more and more durable goods. So historically, we have barley. As a matter of fact, the first recorded medium of exchange, written records tell us that barley emerged where? In Mesopotamia. Where is Mesopotamia? Iran? No.
Syria, Iraq.
No. More Iraq. It's the area between the Tigris and the Euphrates river system, okay, Mesopotamia. So written records reveal, those are the first records. They might exist other mediums of exchanges, but from what we know historically, that a medium of exchange in the form of barley emerged in Mesopotamia. Okay, so we had salt, tobacco, coffee, tea. Prisoners were using what as a medium of exchange? Prisoners in prisons, prisoners use cigarettes historically, right? So cigarettes emerged in prisons as a medium of exchange, right? Seashell, peacock feathers. On the Yap Island, people were using not too long ago Budweiser bottled beers, empty Budweiser bottled beers as medium of exchange. No, I don't know, without the caps, empty. You drink it and then use it as an exchange on the Yap Island, okay? Not too long ago. So, but eventually people settled on the commodity that has the most desired characteristics, and which is metal money. Gold, silver, alloy, which is a mix of gold and silver. Why? Because it's durable, it doesn't have an expiration date, it's transportable, it's recognizable, you can't counterfeit. There are people that would test it, they would know, right? It's portable across time and space, right? Diamond. Why didn't diamonds play the role of a medium of exchange?
Because it loses its value when you divide it.
When you divide it, it's not divisible. A 1 carat diamond is worth more than 2 half carats diamonds, right? So it's losing value. So diamonds didn't play the role of the medium of exchange, okay? So over time, so it took many years. We went through so many transformations, okay? And finally, we settled on gold and silver because it has the most desired characteristics. Now, what are the benefits of a medium of exchange vis-a-vis a barter system? I mean, the inception of a medium of exchange for me marks the beginning of civilization as we know it. Our civilization wouldn't exist if human beings did not discover or naturally for their medium of exchange to emerge in the marketplace. It marks the beginning. It's the most important variable, money, right? It's a means of communication. So we're going to study the implication throughout the remainder of the course, the implications of the medium of exchange, right? How it manifests itself when we do cost-benefit analysis, how it manifests itself when we talk about the price mechanism and the benefits and the implication of price mechanism. So money is fundamental to our modern economy. Some of the benefits that I can talk about is that for the first time we're able to express, using a medium of exchange, relative exchange ratio. So an apple would be worth 2 units of gold, and a banana would be worth 5 units of gold. So all the goods and services, millions and billions of goods and services in the world are expressed by the numeraire, which is the medium of exchange. Prior to the medium of exchange, we would have to calculate that an apple is worth 2 bananas. An apple is worth a quarter of a watermelon. An apple is worth 2 cups of coffee. An apple is worth a quarter of a papaya. So Apple would have exchange ratios with millions of goods and services. Imagine how complicated life would be. But with the numeraire good, which is gold, the medium of exchange is a numeraire good, that means all the goods and the services are all expressed by this numeraire good, which is gold, right? So an apple would be worth this many units of gold, etc., etc.
Maybe it's like the gold standard.
Eventually, we're going to talk about the gold standard, right? So it facilitates evaluations in the marketplace. Otherwise, life would be very complicated. Okay, that's one of the first benefits of the medium of exchange. Another benefit is that we can actually do economic calculations. Right? We can calculate cost and benefits. It would be very complicated to calculate whether if I'm making benefits, I give you apples, I get oranges in return. Okay, it's satisfied, it's a voluntary exchange, but I can't really calculate the exact amount of benefits and vis-a-vis versus all the other goods. So economic calculations, profit maximization, losses, whether if I'm making losses, will become very difficult to evaluate in a barter system. Right? That's why barter economies, I mean, we're primitive economies. Right away, the first human beings came in contact with one another, right away, various types of mediums of exchange emerge. Also, the medium of exchange, very importantly, which is so fundamental, provides us what? A possibility of saving, where I can defer my consumption. That means if I give you the apples, right, I get the medium of exchange. Then from that medium of exchange, I utilize a small portion to get the bananas that I desire. But what can I do with the rest of the medium of exchange? I can save. So for the first time, so savings are impossible. Not impossible, but difficult in a barter economy. What would you be saving? Which commodity? If I'm producing apples, if I have an orange orchard, what am I going to do? I'm going to save my oranges? How long? But with a medium of exchange, I can defer consumption to a year, 1 year. So for the first time, savings are being accumulated. And we're going to find out how important savings are. Saving is foundational. Without savings, there's no capital. And in economics, capital is machinery and equipment. So if we don't have machinery, then we can build the bridges and cars and computers, early stage machinery, infrastructure, right? So without a medium of exchange, we can have savings, and without savings, there'll be no economic progress, okay? So savings is a source of prosperity. Those are only the very few benefits of the medium of exchange, okay? So medium of exchange is very, very important. Now, obviously, eventually human beings settled on gold. Gold, metal money we call it, or gold, and the gold standard is the most important medium of exchange. Until now, if there is political uncertainties, if there is chaos, what do people are going to do? The first thing they do, you're not going to go to the bank, get your dollars or liras or yens, and first thing people are going to do is what? Get their gold. Until today, gold, most people until today, people view gold as a store of value. More important than fiat money, paper money. So since gold functions as the numeraire good, the unit in which other goods are evaluated, then the price level of all goods and services in an economy becomes tied to the market price of gold. Come in. So what are some of the limitations and theoretical flaws of gold? So gold functions as the numeraire good, which all other goods and services are evaluated. And gold becomes tied to the price. The price of gold is the numeraire that reflects all the exchange ratios between the goods and the services. So the reason it has theoretical flaws because when the value of the gold increases, goes up, goes down, depending on the cost of mining, depending on the demand for gold as liquidity, then price of all the other goods and services become volatile, okay? They're all tied to the price of gold, so price of gold goes up, all the prices will go up, price of gold declines, then all the prices are related to the price of gold. So it creates distortions in the marketplace, and then it creates volatility in the marketplace. The second limitation of gold as a medium of exchange, because it is limited in supply, right? Gold, the stock of gold is determined by mining. It's getting more and more difficult to mine. We have to go dig deeper and deeper to get more gold. Market activity is increasing. The volume of trade is increasing. Globalization is on the rise, right? So we need more liquidity. We need more of the medium of exchange. However, extraction of gold is becoming more and more difficult. So there will be a shortage of liquidity in the marketplace. And when you have shortage, what happens to the value of the medium of exchange, which is gold in this circumstance? The value of the gold increases. When the value of the gold is increasing, that means it creates a deflationary effect. It has a deflationary effect in the marketplace. Because there is less gold, there is more demand for gold, right? Then the value increases. That means people will use, right, less and less gold to buy the goods and the services. So we call this deflation in the marketplace. So the value of gold increases and prices are artificially declining because you're using less and less gold, a medium of exchange, to buy those goods and services. So in a deflationary environment, there are some limitations, some shortcomings of the consequences of deflation. One, holding money becomes more and more attractive. If I have an asset that's gaining in value just because I'm holding it, then I'm not incentivized to consume it, to use it. Entrepreneurs are not incentivized to take risks. There's a certain level of riskiness, right, that you want to take as an entrepreneur. But if the value of gold is increasing, then I'm less incentivized to take those risky ventures. So I'm going to hold on to my money. My money is gaining value just by sitting and, So hoarding money becomes more attractive. When that happens, market activity declines, right? People don't want to consume and they don't want to invest. Entrepreneurial activity declines in a deflationary market environment, and employment eventually declines in this inflationary market environment. Furthermore, those holding gold and the medium of exchange become wealthier, right? Without actually producing value, just because you have gold and you get wealthier and wealthier. And that unfortunately creates inequality. I call it bad inequality. It's not a market inequality reflecting consumer aptitudes and hard work, etc. But it's an inequality that emerges just because gold is being used as a medium of exchange, right? And this is arbitrary. So this creates an arbitrary redistribution. The wealthy can become wealthier just because they are holding gold, silver, and other metal money. So the question I would like to raise, and not in this lecture, not in this today's lecture, but in the future, maybe in a month or so, when we get to pillar, I think number 7 or 8, we're going to talk about an alternative medium of exchange. We as economists want a medium of exchange that is neither inflationary nor deflationary. Gold is deflationary. Extraction is limited, demand is getting high. Fiat money tends to be inflationary. Historically, governments, they want to print more money, they want to wage war, they want a redistribution program, government expenditure. So is there a possibility, can we discover a medium of exchange that is neither inflationary nor deflationary? Okay, we're able. It doesn't exist, but theoretically we have it. Okay, so we'll talk about that later on, discovering a medium of exchange that is neither inflationary nor deflationary. Now I would like to talk about the transition. So we started with a barter economy. Then human beings in Mesopotamia, 3000 BC, they discovered barley as a medium of exchange. It emerged in the marketplace, not by design, by decree, by law, but it was emergent in the marketplace via human action. The most marketable commodity became the medium of exchange, right? And then eventually we're going to transition from a gold standard or commodity standard into fiat money. What is fiat money and how did it come to exist? So what we're doing in this lecture, we're tracing the evolution of the medium of exchange over time. So think about it. Historically, for convenience, people didn't want to carry the gold in their pockets, to go to the marketplace, right? Difficult to divide it, etc. You want to put your gold in a money warehouse, in a safe place and protect it. Once you put your gold in a money warehouse, then the money warehouse will issue notes, certificates of deposit, right? You deposit a certain weight of gold, and you get certificates based on the weights of gold, right? You can say this piece of paper is 1 ounce, 3 ounces, 10 ounces, etc. Question?
I forget, who was it, the blacksmiths? Who would be the first banks?
Money warehouses, security places where you put your money and then they give, I'm calling it money warehouse because eventually the money warehouse, as we know, eventually we're going to call it banks. So initially, there were money warehouses. They provide security for your gold that you're depositing. And in return, convenience led them to do what? In the marketplace, they give you certificates of deposit. The certificate represents what? A weight of gold. And then eventually, people are exchanging the certificates of deposits. So think about the money warehouse becoming the bank, and the certificates of deposits are the dollars nowadays that we use to exchange, right? So this allowed the convenience because it's more convenient, it's more effective to use pieces of papers for exchange rather than to carry gold in your pockets, right? So out of necessity, out of catalytic necessity, there emerges a paper money, right? This is the emergence of the paper money. Obviously, over time, governments take an interest in this medium of exchange. They want to control the medium of exchange, right? So central banks are, coming in and they want to take, with the pretense that there are boom bust cycles and things about which we want to talk about. But more importantly, governments, they want to finance wars. That's how the first money that emerged in 1913 in the United Kingdom was to finance wars. Governments, they want to finance wars, right? In order to finance wars, you need money. In order to finance government projects, government welfare programs, etc., you need money. Well, there are a few ways that governments could generate money. One of them is taxation. But taxation are not popular. We remember what happened when the first taxes were imposed, the whiskey taxes, 1770s, 80s, right? When the Pennsylvania farmers, there was a rebellion because we call it the sin tax, tax on whiskey. So the distillers, the farmers, they rebelled, and Washington had to send a militia to put the protests down. So taxation are not important. You don't get elected if you come out and say, oh, I want a tax. But there's an alternative way. There's a hidden way, stealth tax, we call it, and that's what inflation is and printing of money. So commodity money, right, constrained government's desire for expansion, right? And they eventually dismantled what we call commodity money, or the gold standard, that started since the 18th century all the way to early 20th century. They dismantled gold standard and they brought about what we call fiat money. What is fiat money? It's money that is not backed by gold. It's counterfeiting. Okay, it's when you print certificates of deposits without there being any deposits in the money warehouses, the banks. So Britain was the first country that abandoned the gold standard in 1914, excuse me. And that was to finance World War I, okay? They needed money, they went off the gold standard, they started printing. The US followed. 1931, England domestically, permanently, and I'll explain shortly what domestic is, and permanently abandoned the gold standard. Okay, this had to do with the Great Depression. They wanted liquidity in the marketplace, right? So they abandoned the gold standard, increased the money supply to create market activity, right? Market exchange. In 1933, the US followed. Also, domestically, the US went off the gold standard. What does it mean going off the gold standard? That means in the US, prior to 1933, if you actually went to the bank and you gave them the certificate of deposit, you get a weight of gold that represents that certificate. So the window of convertibility of the gold to the dollar was open prior to 1933. 1933, the US abandoned convertibility of the gold to dollar to gold. So that means if you went to the bank in 1933, you said, this is the certificate of deposit, I want my gold back. They said, no more gold. Okay, so the US went fiat. That means from then on, the US government was printing money without there being gold to back it. Now, what are some of the shortcomings and limitations of fiat money? We talked about the shortcomings and limitations, theoretical flaws of the gold standard, but let's talk about the shortcomings and theoretical flaws of fiat money. Fiat money historically has been inflationary since its inception. Inflationary means that you print more and more and more. And when we're printing more and more and more money, what happens to the prices of the goods and services? They go up. Because productivity is not changing, but we have more mediums of exchanges. So more mediums of exchanges, more money is chasing the same number of goods and services. So it has an inflationary effect. The overall price level rises. But the true definition of inflation is an increase in money supply. Price rising is a consequence of increasing the money supply, okay? Because price levels could rise for other reasons. That's not inflation, okay? So inflation, the correct definition is an increase in the money, inflating the money supply. Well, obviously, it dilutes the effectiveness of each dollar, purchasing power of money declines, and it hurts the most productive members of the society. Why? Because if you have savings, for example, you work hard and you have savings, now your savings, opposite to the gold standard, what's happening to the value of your savings? They're declining in value. So you work hard, you're a productive member of the society, you're saving. What is saving? It's delayed gratification. Right? Societies who delay gratification are the most prosperous versus societies that have high time preference. High time preference means they want the now, right? So societies that exhibit cultures, countries that exhibit low time preference, right? They save more and they are more prosperous. Now because of inflationary monetary system that we have, suddenly your savings are getting devalued, right? You're being punished for delaying your gratification. So it changes human behavior, right? It distorts our inner thinkings in the marketplace. Invisible theft. Inflation is also a form of an invisible theft. When the government is increasing the money supply, it's an indirect form of taxation. You remember we said earlier taxation are unpopular, but what do inflation do when the government is printing money? It's an indirect form of taxation because the purchasing power of every dollar in your pocket is declining. It's a form of enslavement, you know. It's taxation without a visibility. It's stealth form of a taxation. Professor Matthew Geiger over here, in his book, An Economic Analysis of Suicide, he actually talks about how inflation demoralizes market participants, leading to what he calls suicidality. And I've witnessed experiences like this. I grew up in Beirut, Lebanon. The Lebanese lira devalued from, 3 Lebanese lira was the equivalent of $1. Today, it's 100,000. So imagine people who were middle class, upper middle class, maybe millionaires. Suddenly now your $1 million is worth $50. And I've read stories, There is a book, The Lexus and the Olive Tree by Friedman. He actually talks about suicides, right? He identifies people committing suicide because of this, inflationary, this theft. But nevertheless, inflation doesn't only have an economic consequences, implications, but also social, cultural implications, and suicidality is one of them. Inflation, it creates inequality. I call it fiat inequality. It's not a natural market inequality, based on aptitudes and, luck and, all these factors, but it creates a man-made inequality, right? Because the first receivers of inflated money benefit at the expense of late receivers. Where is the money goes when government prints money, right? Electronically, actually, it's being sent. It goes to commercial banks, right? And most of the people that benefit from this newly printed money are people, think about real estate developers, certain groups of people, right? They take the money and they use that money to buy labor, housing, etc. At yesterday's prices, before the rise of the prices. But when over time the inflation hits all the market, all the prices rises, they have benefited at the expense of the late receivers. The late receivers of the money will have to buy goods and services at the inflated price, whereas the first receivers are buying at the earlier prices, the yesterday prices. We call this the Cantillon effect in Austrian economics. Okay, so new money in a way is it has a redistributive effect in the marketplace. So it creates what I call, it's distortionary, as I mentioned. Not all prices rise. When new money enters the market, not all prices rise at the same time. Some prices rise at a faster rate than other prices. Some wages rise earlier than with other wages. There is a catching up, there is a gap, right? So this gap creates distortions in the marketplace, right? For example, large real estate developers benefit by buying construction material, right? And eventually goods and services, at the groceries rise. It takes time for the price to hit these goods and services. So this price distortions create miscalculations in the marketplace and misallocation of resources. And then eventually I'm going to tie these distortions into what we call the boom-bust cycle and the inflationary effect of boom-bust cycle. So, and that's the business cycle. The science of macroeconomics exists just to explain the business cycle. Mainstream Keynesian economists, they argue that innate in the marketplace is what they call a boom-bust cycle, right? What is a boom-bust cycle? It's like the business cycle. We have inflationary period, market activity is increasing, and then we have a bust phase where market activity declines, unemployment rises, and Keynesian economists say that they blame this to they call it what do they call it? The animal spirit. They have a name for it. They call it the animal spirit, the urge to save rather than consume. They say this is just innate. And somehow it's happening that we wake up one day, all of us decide collectively to not engage in market activity, save, and then that creates a bust phase. The economy is declining. It's a vicious cycle. We're not buying goods and services. So companies have to lay off the workers. Unemployment is going up. People are unemployed. They can't buy goods and services. Then the economy, market activity declines further. So it takes us a spiral downward into a recession and depression. And they say all this is happening in a marketplace. It's innate to the marketplace. It's the animal spirit. That's the extent of their explanation. As Austrian economists will discuss in the future, and I'll introduce it to you today, there is no such thing as boom-bust cycle innate to the marketplace. Any boom-bust cycle, the business cycle, is man-made. Okay, it's directly linked to government intervention in the marketplace and inflation and inflating the marketplace. Via quantitative easing, fiscal policies, as well as monetary policies. So when governments inflate the money supply, the medium of exchange, in an inflationary medium of exchange, the first thing that happens, that decreases the interest rate. What is the interest rate? Interest rate is the price of money. If there is too much money, too much medium of exchange, then the price of money, the price of borrowing declines. When the interest rate is declining, then investors are distorted, their inner calculations are distorted, so they are more likely to take risky investments. We want some risk in the marketplace, but the level of riskiness should emerge via market activity, not arbitrarily by fiat because of government monetary policy. So now our decision making is distorted in the marketplace. We're more likely to take unwarranted, right, rather attractive investments. We're going to borrow more. Money is cheap. Let's borrow more. Okay, this creates an artificial boom. I call it artificial because we're going to find out there is no savings that is backing these unwarranted investments that we're taking. Okay, entrepreneurs believe that because in a real world, outside of government intervention, the only reason interest rates will decline if savings are going up. So entrepreneurs, they say, wow, interest rate is going down because savings are going up. So let's take investments, produce more cars in anticipation of a future consumption because your savings will be consumed. But the reality is when it's artificial, savings are not going up. Savings are the same, but you're producing more apples and oranges. And at the end, it creates a glut in the market. There'll be a surplus. So now we have to reduce prices, we have to lay off workers, and that's the bust phase of the boom-bust cycle. So it's an artificial boom, and the bust phase follows naturally, automatically. Now you might ask me, why do governments want to reduce the interest rate, inflate the money supply? Political reasons. Any government that comes to power, they want to inflate the money supply. It creates an artificial boom. Employment is going up, right? You're going to get re-elected. And then when the reality hits, now you have another administration, and then there is another cycle of increasing the money supply. So that's why they call it the boom-bust cycle. A boom-bust cycle is not a market cycle, it's a fiat cycle. It's a government-generated cycle, okay? Lack of capital formation. Another shortcoming of fiat money is the lack of capital formation, right? If prices are perpetually rising in an inflationary environment, would you want to wait to buy your car or your house? Obviously not. Right? Prices are perpetually rising, so I'd better buy now rather than wait. So again, it cuts down on our time preference. Okay, so you want to buy now versus the future. So it cuts down on savings, and we've discussed how important savings are for prosperity. It's with savings that this civilization is built on. Delayed gratification, right? Savings are important foundation, but we're undermining savings in a fiat inflationary market environment. You don't want to wait, you just want to buy now, okay? Historically, wars have been financed by taxation, right? Before fiat money, the kings, they had to go door to door to nobility, visit the people, convince them that there is a danger, that we need to wage a war. Wars were relatively short-lived. The king would run out of money, and then that's it. You come to an agreement. You shake hands, you decision, you lose a piece of land, you gain a piece of land. But when war is financed by fiat money, then it's never ending. It can never end. What you do is you impoverish, you enslave your people, because you keep printing money and you keep printing money, right? Then wars are lasting longer, right? Countries like the US, when they have what we're going to call eventually, they have, you know, the dominance, the US dollar has a dominant position in the medium of exchange, right? So they're going to print more and more money. So I would expect that we're going to see more wars in a fiat money environment rather than when wars are financed by taxation or, you know, by some other means. It's never ending. Printing of money creates endless wars, okay, if it's financed by inflation. That's the end of the fiat, the emergence of fiat money, the benefits of fiat money, and the theoretical limitation and the theoretical flaws of fiat money. So let's take a 5 minutes break, and then I would like to talk about the international gold standard and the Bretton Woods Agreement, and moving away actually, you know, not domestically, but internationally from the gold standard, because the fiat money that we talked about was only domestically, okay? In 1933, I said the US moved domestically away from the gold standard. But internationally, if a foreign country brought their certificates of deposit, the US would give them the gold, okay? In particular, right, until 1971 with the Nixon administration, when for the first time the United States went off the golden standard internationally. Domestically 1933, international 1971. That's what I want to talk about in the next lecture. So let's take 5 minutes, 10 minutes break, and then we'll come back. Thank you.